Alissa, I'm so excited to have you on the Mind Your Hormones podcast. I can't wait to chat with you. For those of you who are listening, Alissa and I are in a mastermind together. That's how we got connected. And I just love everything that you talk about. And I know so many women in this community are going to connect with it. So first, just introduce yourself. Tell us a little about you, how you got into this highly sensitive world of teaching people about this, all the things. Just give us a little rundown of you and what you do.
Yay. Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to chat. And yeah, it's so interesting how I got into all of this. I will say that I've always known I was a very sensitive person. I've just been that emotional person. I always felt everything very intensely. I was always a very passionate person.
Mm.
And, I didn't think this was a good thing for the majority of my life because you always hear oh, stop being so sensitive. You're being so dramatic. Get over
Yes.
it. That was the messaging. And so I definitely suppressed it for the majority of my life. But when I was in my early 20s, I was working in this really stressful corporate job and started getting really sick. I had all of these digestive issues and
Mm.
yeah, it was really crazy. And I started working with a holistic doctor after seeing all these different people and things weren't working out for me, different gastroenterologists, no one could
Oh
help
yeah.
me.
So many
So I
people
said,
listening will relate to that.
okay, yeah, so
Yeah.
that was my story. And it was
Yep.
a couple of years and feeling honestly very gaslit, very much what's wrong with me.
Mm.
And so when I started seeing this holistic doctor, he really opened my eyes to the mind body connection. And he was really linking all of this emotional stress that I was hanging on to and just kind of showing me oh, part of the reason your stomach is so messed up right now is because you're so stressed and you are just
Yes.
taking everything on. And so I started getting really into self-development and finding different practices to calm myself because I really did not have any healthy coping strategies.
Mm.
And so I was reading all these self-help books, and my mom had somehow heard about this book called The Highly Sensitive Person, which is written by Dr. Elaine Aron. And she showed me this book and she's like, hey, I think this describes you perfectly. So I read the book and I learned that there is literally a trait and a term called highly sensitive person. And
Mm.
it's 15 to 20. Now they're saying maybe 30% of the population are
Wow.
considered highly sensitive people. Yeah. So we have
Mm.
nervous systems that are more sensitive. We are more impacted legitimately by things in our environment. And so when I learned this, it was groundbreaking. It changed everything. And it just catapulted me on this wild ride of getting to know and embrace my sensitivity. And then over time, I got to a place of where I was helping other HSPs, highly sensitive people, HSPs, figure this out for themselves as well. So it's
Wow.
crazy how divine it all was.
Yeah, that's so, I mean, so many people listening, first of all, are going to connect with gut issues. Number one, that's something that so many people in this community experience. I also experienced that. And I know that when I am stressed, it goes right to my stomach. I for sure, that's definitely where I hold a lot of stress. I know so many of my clients also. I think a lot of women just in general, have that, well, every person in general will have that connection. So they could definitely resonate with that. And how you said you're more sensitive, your nervous system is more sensitive to certain things. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, is because a lot of people, especially when they get into this world, a lot of people specifically listening are listening to help balance their hormones, regulate their period, get pregnant, all this stuff. And we tend to hold on to the nutrition side of things and the workout side of things, which is so important. Obviously, I'm a nutritionist. Yes, of course, the things that you're eating, putting in your body have an effect on it. But we kind of will shy away from changing actual things in your day to day, having these healthy coping mechanisms that are going to impact your nervous system in a positive way, and kind of ignoring, because it's easier. Honestly, for me, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's easier to change what you eat than to
Mm-hmm.
change how you deal with situations. So how can you, all right, so what are some things that you would say, how does it specifically affect your nervous system, and then ways that you have learned to support yourself through it, and then other people? Well, actually, before you answer that, if someone is I'm actually not sure if I am a highly sensitive person, obviously there's a quiz you could take, but what are some characteristics of it? Let's just do that first, and then we could go into the nervous system stuff.
Totally. So some characteristics are highly sensitive people are going to be more sensitive to stimulation in their environment. The scientific term for HSP, for highly sensitive person, is sensory processing sensitivity. So
Oh.
it's a trait. It's not a disorder or anything that you have to like get diagnosed with, but
Hmm.
it's just about the way that we take in stimulation in our environment. So HSPs are going to be people who you might be impacted by like fluorescent lights or a flickering light in your space that might be really agitating to you.
Mm.
Or if you have clothing where like the tag is itchy or like the neckline is just like bothering you, those are some like random things. Highly sensitive people tend to be more sensitive about their sleep. They might need really specific sleep environments, like pitch
Mm.
black, certain temp, like weighted blanket, like very sensitive and particular about things. And then also there's the emotional piece of it. Like sensitive people are going to be more emotionally sensitive.
Hmm.
So they tend to cry more easily, like a sad commercial, whatever, is going to make them cry oftentimes more than a non-HSP.
Yeah.
Also like empathy, highly sensitive people actually are known to be more empathetic than non highly sensitive people. So
Mm.
there's actually brain scans that they've done that show that there are more active mirror neurons in the brain that are firing in a highly sensitive brain versus not. So
Wow.
what those do is, yeah, they like allow us to kind of understand and feel somebody else's experience. And so HSPs are just like really naturally good at that. So a
Mm.
highly sensitive person is usually that friend that like everyone goes to for advice. Like they're often just like they have that like inviting energy a lot of times where you just can sense that they care and that
Mm.
they're like going to be a good emotional support type of person. Also another thing is HSPs do get overwhelmed, overstimulated more easily. So um sorry, my husband is calling me and I'm turning it
Oh,
off.
it's okay.
um So highly sensitive people are going to get overwhelmed and overstimulated more easily because of the sensitive nervous system things. So
Mm.
what this can look like is like if they have a busy to-do list or like a packed schedule and there's not enough downtime built into their schedule, that can actually be really overwhelming to them. Whereas other
Mm.
people might be like, it's completely fine. So those are
Yeah.
just some things that can kind of be telltale signs that you're highly sensitive.
Yeah. And how, like, what have you seen of ways that that can manifest? Like, if people, meaning like, if you do have a really like packed out schedule and you're like freaking out about it, like, do you see that a lot of times it manifests as anxiety, as anger, as like, what have you seen like a connection with that, like emotional wise?
All of the above. It definitely is like different for each person depending on their kind of like trauma response or just like their default settings. So I will
Mm.
see some people who go into like a freeze mode where they're like, I am so overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I can't do this. And they shut down and they just want to like avoid and hide out. There are other people who feel very overwhelmed by it and like react in that kind of like action way where they don't know how to stop. And then this can
Mm.
manifest in like burning out because our bodies are more sensitive. So we're going to be impacted if we're literally not making time for rest and like to take our time intentionally. So
Yeah.
that, yeah, can manifest in just like over productivity, not knowing when to stop, anxiety, anger, agitation. It can be really tough if you don't know the
Yeah.
signs and you don't have tools in place to kind of catch yourself and support yourself.
Yeah, and recognize it. And I've resonated with so many of those examples, by the way, of like a highly sensitive person. And I know I took that quiz and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I don't know, I think I would have scored higher on it. But anyway, they shoot, what was I just gonna say? The coping mechanisms, I can't remember. Anyway, so with oh yeah, okay. So if someone is like, okay, yes, I definitely feel like this is who I am. We're also in a world where it's like this go, go, go productivity is just like a norm. So it could be really uncomfortable for people to like slow down, especially I know you're a mom. So that's a whole nother aspect of it. So what are some ways, like kind of what we were touching on before, that like you have found is really supportive to create that environment where, first of all, you're like acknowledging and recognizing maybe when your plate is too full or you are getting like really overstimulated, how you can change it without like beating yourself up about it and being like, oh, I am just being quote unquote too sensitive, or like this should just be easy for me. Like so and so can do this, like I can't do this, you know, like that whole thing.
Yeah.
What have you found has been like helpful for that, or any like support around that?
Yeah, so much, because this is just huge, and the comparison thing is never going to be helpful. And I've
Mhm.
totally fallen into that.
Yeah.
So, a few things I would say are, one, just like understanding the trait, embracing it, like knowing it's a part of you. I think a lot of times when we deny it or we shame ourselves for being sensitive, it makes it that much harder, because it can be this vibe of like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? This is so annoying that I can't keep up. It's like that doesn't do us any good. So it's like when we learn about the trait and understand this is a real thing, this is how I'm wired, we can
Right.
start to kind of have like some respect for it and like see that it's important to honor it, because the majority, I mean, I don't want to say the majority, but a lot of HSPs I have worked with found their way to this trait because they burnt out, because they had a chronic illness, because they had pushed
Mhm.
themselves too hard. So a lot of us
Yes.
have gotten burned and we're like, okay, I don't want to do that again. And so, we have to learn a new way. So that's one piece of it. But of course, then having like practices built into your life to support you. I always like to tell my clients to put their armor on for the day, because a lot of highly sensitive people will like feel like the world is just like too chaotic and too much and too hard for them.
Mm.
And so it can feel like they go into a busy office and, oh my God, I'm like assaulted with everyone's energy and it's too much. And
Yeah.
so it's really important to like set yourself up to have more tolerance for those experiences, because it's a promise. Like the world's crazy, like things are going to come up. So what can we do to support ourselves through it? So those
Yeah.
practices are different for everyone, and it will also depend on your season of life. Before I was a mom, every morning I would meditate, I would exercise, I would journal, like I could take like an hour and just like do all of those things. Right now, I don't have that time. So for me,
Mhm.
what I prioritize is like, I love journaling. That's super helpful for me. So
Me too.
when my daughter, yeah, it's just like getting those thoughts out. So when my
Hmm.
daughter's like playing independently for like half an hour, I will do my journaling. And then when she takes her nap, I always do a workout. So it's like, these are
Mm.
just like practices that fill up my cup and help me have, I like to think of it as like a bank account, like every good thing you do for yourself, you're like making deposits so that when crazy things happen and it's like a withdrawal, like you have more to withdraw from your
Yes.
account. So
Yeah. Yes.
sometimes sometimes we can get caught up in that productivity hustle vibe where it's like, gotta go, go, go. I have time to myself. I gotta go. But I've learned time and time again that no, I really, if I have that time, I need to first pour into myself and then I can do those things. So I
Hmm.
love helping HSPs figure out what works for them. Some other things would be like dance or going for a daily walk. I'm a fan. I love EFT tapping,
Oh,
emotional freedom
yes.
technique, so
Same.
helpful. And
So
there's like
good.
5-minute videos. Like I can always find time to do that if I'm stressed, or if I'll just tap on the points myself if I like
Hmm.
can't go watch a video. So just
Yeah.
having things like that is huge. And
And
then
the
another
awareness
thing,
around it.
the awareness for sure, recognizing those signs in yourself where, oh my gosh, I'm hitting a point where I'm gonna like be really overwhelmed. Like
Hmm.
that's
Yeah, and
huge.
just like making it okay. Like it's
Yeah.
okay this is happening. It's not like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling like this. Da, da, da. Like
Mhm.
all of that is what I really resonated with, and I know a lot of people, especially like my clients that I've talked to, is being in a room and like and this I definitely experience of like picking up other people's energy, and like feeling like you're responsible for making the energy better, for changing the environment, or like you're taking on other people's problems. So I like the idea of an armor. I've like done this before where I literally will like either envision like a bubble around me at all times where like no one can get through it unless I like invite them in,
Mhm.
or like literally wearing like an armor from like, I don't know, like a soldier would wear or something like that,
Yeah.
like material armor around me to like protect me. But I feel like so many people can resonate with that, especially if you are going to work in an office, or even if like you're just going to the grocery store or whatever, like family parties. Like, I mean, there's just like so many different things, and just taking like 2 seconds before you get out of the car and just being like, okay, wait, let me just visualize this armor around me, and like even being like, okay, I just have to go to the bathroom, and like take a couple of seconds and take a couple breaths like in between this family party. Like I think that could be super, super helpful for people, so they don't get that like overstimulation feeling. They can actually like enjoy their time more.
100%. Yeah. And I think it's like a huge part of it too is like intentionality, and also like taking ownership of our experience, because a lot of times I'll first work with HSPs and they're like, oh my gosh, like everyone's emotions drain me. Everyone's energy affects me. And it's very much this story of like, they're doing this to me. And like the experience is real of like being more open and feeling those things. Like that's completely valid. But it does not serve us when we kind of just like accept that as like, oh, this is how it is. Like sucks that to be sensitive because I'm going to pick it all up. So it's always like, okay, I understand that I can be intentional about the energy that I'm going to bring into a space. I can be intentional about, you know, being protective of my energy, having practices like you were sharing. Like, I just think that like mindset piece is important too, because it shows us that we have more autonomy and it's not just like us against the world, you know? So,
Yeah, totally. And like we were talking about with the nervous system, which I want to get into, is like this is obviously can cause stress in your life. Like that's like what we were talking about. If you're like super overstimulated, you're not managing it well, like that is going to affect your cortisol levels, and your cortisol levels are 100% going to affect your menstrual cycle. So like people who are listening, if you have an irregular period, your period is late, or you're struggling with your fertility, or you have digestive issues, like whatever it is that's going on, like we can't ignore the stress factor. And a lot of people will always come to this last because like I was saying before, it's the hardest thing to do and the hardest thing to change and overcome. But it is 100% going to affect you, and it might affect you more easily than other people. Like even just like traveling and stuff like that. Like I always used to have, my period would always go off when I would travel. And I was just like, oh, it's just like what happens with me. Like I didn't really understand the connection of it and how I could like support myself to stop that from happening. But this is a piece that I want you to look at if you are listening and you are experiencing these imbalances, because this is something that's going to affect you. So from like a nervous system perspective, again, are just the same practices like that we kind of talked about that support you? Do you notice like caffeine is something that is, you know, something that you would suggest HSPs steer away from? Like, you know, exercise perspective, like anything that you have on that you found to be supportive?
definitely. Yeah. So it's for sure like an opportunity for sensitive people to explore what works for them, you know, and it's kind of trial and error. So like for me, when I was in the height of like digestive issues, I'm really, really working hard on managing my stress because I've had adrenal fatigue. I had all the things, like I was in a really bad place. So at that time I did cut out caffeine, or I cut out coffee, but I drink matcha lattes every morning, but it's, you know, that more balanced caffeine. So I did that for a year because it was just like something that I realized when I cut out the coffee, I felt better. I felt less jittery.
Yeah.
And the caffeine really did exacerbate my anxiety. So that's definitely something to try for people. And now today, like I do drink 1 cup of coffee. It's completely fine. It doesn't like impact me in a negative way. But when I was in my most vulnerable state and when I was really in a time of like healing, I cut that out. It made such a huge difference. Also, with like added sugar, I
Yes.
didn't have that for a long time because I noticed when I had that, I felt more anxious. I felt like that switch would flip more quickly. And so it's like things like that for sure, like paying attention to those things.
Well, I want to pause on that for a second
Yeah.
because that is huge. And I always talk about this too, of like when you're in a state of healing, when you are working on your fertility, when you are trying to regulate your period, when you have adrenal fatigue and you're trying to work that out, like there are certain things that you have to be more disciplined about in the beginning and more committed to, like the caffeine, like situations like this. And it doesn't mean it has to last forever. It's like that 1 cup of coffee that you have while your adrenals are like so taxed out and you're trying to heal them. and your period is all messed up and you have all this PMS, whatever, that's just going to like keep you digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper. But once you heal and you get out of that, that 1 cup of coffee is not, obviously I always recommend having food first, but it's not going to, totally knock you off like it does when you're in the midst of healing. So I think it's so important that you said that, because it does depend on where you're at in your healing journey of like how disciplined you want to be about stuff, and how things like you're more sensitive to stuff during that time than you are once you are in a more healed place. I mean, I always believe we're continuously healing, but once you're like kind of out of that like black hole. So I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge because honestly, when I first started that whole journey, I was like, oh my gosh, is this my life forever? And like, it's not. Like, I honestly follow kind of like a 70-30 rule. Like, I know what foods work for me.
Yeah.
I stay within the guidelines that work for my body specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't follow any specific rules. It's all just like very personal, but like, I give myself space to indulge and it like is all good. But it's really interesting too, because a huge part of my healing, like honestly, I major was the stress reduction, the nervous system regulation. I like one specific story I just have to share because it always blows my mind. So I had small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and leaky gut. I was like really sick. I could not have grains. I couldn't have sugar. I was like super strict diet. But my best friend got married and I was the maid of honor in her wedding. So I went back to Minnesota, where I'm from, to go to her wedding. And I was like, screw it. Like, I just want to indulge. I want to enjoy myself. So I had a cupcake and I had mac and cheese, all the gluten, all the things.
Were you so sick?
I wasn't sick. And here's the thing. It's interesting. So I had been at the healing for a while, but I was calm. I was relaxed. I was enjoying myself. I wasn't stressed. And at this time it had been, a couple of months into my journey. I wasn't as, if I was like brand new, it would have not been okay, but I had been at it, and it was it just showed me that like that rest and digest, that calm parasympathetic state, I was able to do it. Not what I would recommend to somebody in their journey, but it just really highlighted it for me. And so that was like a turning point in my journey. And it made me see like knowing how to regulate yourself is huge. And like, I'll say now, like through that whole healing journey and learning how to reduce stress and things like that, like my hair finally grew. Like it's really long now. I used to never grow.
Long and thick.
Thank you. And it never used to grow. Like all of these things just kind of clicked into place. And I have to say a lot of it is the stress reduction. So
yeah, because you're hair growth is not like vital to your survival. Like your body doesn't need your hair to grow to survive. And when you're in that fight or flight survival mode, your body's only allocating whatever energy you have to like what you literally need to survive. So it's like your hair and your nails, your skin, like that shit is last to go. Like it does not matter. But that's such a good point about being in a relaxed state and you were in parasympathetic mode. For people listening, we talk about this a lot, but the autonomic nervous system, there's a parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So it's a rest and digest and then the fight or flight mode. Most of us are even eating in fight or flight mode. You're eating while we're working, while we're driving, whatever. And it's like, sometimes if you're getting like bloated and you're having digestive issues, like, yes, of course we need to look at the foods, but it's also like the environment that you're consuming it in, like, which is what you were just saying. It's like, okay, how can we just like take 3 deep breaths to get into that parasympathetic mode before we consume something that we're eating, or before you're going to go into your, family's house for this gathering. And like, you're like, okay, let me just like center myself, like literally taking some breaths, I feel like is going to be so helpful for people who are HSPs. Have you noticed any work around like breath work or meditation and stuff like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, that is super helpful. Meditation has been huge in my journey. That was like the first unlock for me, just to like recognize the power of like calming my system and how that translated into my daily life. I have noticed that there's a wider gap, like from the way I want to react. You know what I mean? So it's like something 100%. Triggering happens. I don't automatically just have a reaction. I can like have that space.
Yes.
So meditation is cool for that.
Yes.
And I like breath work. I have to I've done a bit of it. I still get like, to be quite honest, I still get like nervous about like going really deep because it is so intense, the like really intense breathwork sessions.
Yeah.
But when I have it's a lot, but like when I've allowed myself to go there, it's pretty amazing. I also love Reiki healing.
Oh,
I have actually
gracefully,
got
yes.
certified in that
Oh,
in
amazing.
2020. Yeah, so that's something like I practice on myself. I have done with clients. Like
Oh, that's so
I've
cool.
yeah, so that's really amazing. So just like I don't know, I'm a huge advocate for like try different modalities,
Mm-hmm.
see what works for you, what feels good, and like stick with it for a while. Like sometimes I feel like people are like, "Oh, I tried meditating once and it didn't work." And it's
I
like,
know.
"Oh, that's not like you have no one's good at it at first and no one's ever really good at it, I don't
I
think."
mean, yeah, I feel like
You
my brain is always on when I'm meditating, but like
Mhm. Mhm.
that's why I tell people, I'm like, it doesn't feel like it's working in the moment, but like you'll notice it, like you were saying, like in your day-to-day life. Um,
Exactly.
and like sticking to whichever one, like being consistent with the one practice that like you feel helps you the most. Like I'm always consistent with my meditation. Obviously, it's gonna look very different once I have the baby, but and then I'll like do the other things like randomly. Like I'll do a breath work session. I haven't obviously since I've been pregnant, but
Yeah.
I do like doing them like a couple times a year because it is just like so clearing. My mom actually does Reiki as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna have her do it on me like while I'm in labor. I've like been reading stuff up about like how it helps with like pain and the fetus. I'm like, oh, not the fetus, it's a baby now. But anyway, so if people don't know what Reiki is, it's like a, how would you explain it? It's an energy healing.
Yeah, energy healing. It's like basically like connecting with like source energy. It's all just
Yeah.
like
The
loving and it's
chakras.
chakras. Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really cool.
Hmm.
Okay, I love all of that. So now let's talk about like people who are in partnership.
Mm.
If they have a partner, whether they're living with someone who's a roommate or it's your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, like whatever it is, how do you navigate it if like you are an HSP and your partner isn't, or vice versa? You're like, I'm not the sensitive person, but my partner is. What are is your spouse personally a HSP also or no?
No, so I can
Okay.
speak very personally to this. And
Okay.
it's like one of the most common things I'm asked. And I'm like actually like creating so much around this because I'm like, oh, there's so much opportunity to support people with this. So
Yes.
yeah, so I'm like on the sensitivity test, like it's out of 27 questions for everyone listening. I'm 24 out of 27. So I'm like pretty
Wow.
high on it. And
Hmm.
then my husband, I had him take it once and he's 9 out of 27.
Okay. So like
So
it's polar opposite.
yeah, so we're like quite different and our personalities are so different. So
Mhm.
there's a lot that I've learned and something I always tell HSPs because the biggest thing they'll tell me is like, "Ugh, I don't feel understood, I don't feel seen, I don't feel like people really get me." And a
Mm.
lot of times we are seeking that validation from our partner, from our significant other. We're like, I need you to tell me it's okay that I'm sensitive because a lot of times we're actually not accepting that within ourselves. And so we're kind
Oof.
of coming at it from this energy of like, I need you to accept me. And so
So
something I
good.
tell people is like, first and foremost, like begin to love it in yourself. Because when you kind of feel like this is me, take it or leave it, like I am highly sensitive and it's this more like unapologetic vibe, you bring that energy with you. You're not needing
Yes.
somebody else to fill the void. And then you have the confidence to assert the needs that you have, whether it's like, hey, when I get home from work I really need like 10 minutes to decompress, it's not personal, I'm overstimulated from today, like,
Mm.
just like being able to assert yourself because when we don't feel good about our sensitivity, then we can often feel kind of guilty or like, oh my gosh, like I'm being too much, I'm yeah, like I have issues or whatever. So it's like
Yeah.
learning that about yourself and getting to a place where you can share your needs confidently is huge
Mm.
because I've found that a lot of times we are just expecting the other person to just know what we want and know exactly how to respond. And a lot
Mm.
of times we actually really need to like teach them how to
Yeah.
respond. like
Right. Yeah.
like my husband and I, he now knows he's again not sensitive. He's not very like emotional,
Hmm.
not forthcoming about that. But he's learned that like if I want to vent about something, I'll be like, hey, I just need to vent about this. I don't need you to fix it. I'm just like, I know this might seem silly, but it's like really bothering me. And I'll share it with him. And he's like, now he knows to just listen and be like, oh, I can see why that would be hard for you. And like, that's
Right.
it. That's all I
Right.
need.
And
But
men
I've had,
tend to want to fix things
Mhm.
too. So it's like, I notice also if I go to like share something with my husband and I don't preface it with like, I just want to vent, he'll take it on as like, this is now a problem I have to fix, and get like,
Yeah.
okay, like I like, what am I supposed to do to help? Like, I'm like, no, like this isn't about you. I just wanted to vent about this. So like going into the conversation of that, I like that, of saying like, hey, I just want to vent, or like I need time when I get home, like really figuring out too like specific. So do you recommend like saying it like obviously in the moment of when you're saying something like, hey, I just want to vent, but like for, hey, I just need 10 minutes when I get home, like do you recommend having like a full conversation about that? Do you do it just like in the moment, like or just like sprinkle it in as you get more comfortable asking for things? Like how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be helpful if you have the awareness in the moment. What I've found and has been my experience is a lot of times these conversations come after you have a disagreement, an
Yeah.
argument, because you weren't feeling seen. So for instance, for me, like if I'm overstimulated, like there's just too much going on, the house is chaotic, and I'm like, and then my husband's like blaring music, like it drives me crazy. And so I've had
Mm,
times where I've gotten snippy with him and like been rude, and
yeah.
he was like, what's going on? And so later on, I've had a conversation like, hey, I just get so overstimulated when all of this is going on. So like
Right.
sometimes I get to this place and it's because I'm highly sensitive. Now that
Mm.
doesn't give me a like pass to just like be a jerk if I'm overstimulated, but he can like recognize, and I can now say to him like, hey, I'm feeling overstimulated. Can you turn down your music? I'm going to go clean up the kitchen, and then I can like
Mm.
come back with more of a grounded state. So, I would say, I think probably having a conversation about it ahead of time is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably going to be trial and error where you have these
After.
moments or after, yeah, where you're
Yeah.
like, oh, that's what
Oh, shit.
happened. And
Yeah.
it's and I actually just recorded and put out an episode of my podcast this week, which
And
is
what's the
for
name of your podcast?
the Sensitive and Soulful Show.
Okay. We're
So I
obviously going
just
to put
put
all that in the show notes, but just wanted you to plug it real quick.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Keep
Yeah, and
going.
then in that episode, it's for non-highly sensitive people to listen to so they can understand how to
Oh,
support their sensitive person. Like people always were
love
like,
that.
can you record an episode like this? And now it's something where it's like, this is what it feels like. These are the signs, and here's some things you can do to support your partner. And it's also,
Mm,
I'm very much like, it's like a complementary thing. It's a teamwork thing. Like I don't believe in like, oh, like you need to acquiesce and baby the sensitive person. Like
right.
that's not the vibe at all.
Right.
That's not what I teach, but more to just help bridge the gap and create that understanding. And one other thing I always tell my clients is like, because they'll feel frustrated that they don't feel understood or seen. And I'm like, you have to think about how our society views sensitivity. Like you don't really hear that many
Mm,
people being like, oh, it's great to be sensitive. Like the majority
yes.
of what we hear is like, don't cry, suck it up, stop being so emotional.
Hmm.
So I'm like, if it's hard for your partner or your family to grasp this, like understand that there's so much conditioning, and they might have
Yeah.
had their own like experiences where somebody, caused them to suppress their emotions. So
Hmm.
like knowing that, and also just telling your people like, hey, I'm learning to embrace my sensitivity. This is something that's hard for me. So I would just love if you could support me in this. I'm working on it.
Yeah, because even that too, it's like, first of all, I love that. And it's like, for the person who is sensitive, we have that conditioning too. So it's like we also have that going in of like, I'm a little uncomfortable even having these feelings. So like you want even more so for other people to get it, because you're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, like you have that. I don't even know how to explain what I'm saying, but I know you know what
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what you were saying before, like in the episode that you recorded, which we'll put that in the show notes too, that specific episode, but the signs of it, because like if someone again is listening and they're like not sensitive, but maybe their partner is, and they're like, oh, it sounds like they might be. What are some of those signs that you maybe think that like they could pick up on, like, oh, okay, like I might be noticing that like something is going on here?
Yeah, like if you notice your partner is like, yeah, getting overstimulated, like getting overwhelmed and like agitated and like snippy with you, like,
Mm,
or like they are like the kitchen is dirty and all of a sudden it's like the end of the world and you're like, why is this such a big deal? And they're like stress cleaning, like,
yeah.
it could be related to that.
Mm-hmm.
And also again, yeah, being particular about just like certain things like their clothes or the lighting in the environment. Like a lot of HSPs will tell me like, I need to dim the lights, or like, oh my
Mm,
gosh, I need to wear earplugs. It's just like way too loud. Like those kind of little like idiosyncrasies, quirks, whatever, like are
yeah.
signs. And also it's like you're the sensitive people tend to be that like kind of soft-hearted person where they
Mm-hmm.
are just like more gentle and tender about things. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of, sense that.
Do you notice that like with men who are highly sensitive, I'm sure most of the people you work with are women, but that they don't present as that like soft, gentle, even though they can be HSPs just because they're a man. So they're supposed to be like strong and whatever, but like it could present themselves in other ways without looking like the like sensitive type of it. Like in not so much sensitive because that could be so many different things, but like how you said, more like emotional and stuff like that. Do you notice that it presents differently with men?
Yeah, I actually have. So interestingly enough, too, just for people listening, like men are 50% of HSPs are men, 50% are women. Like it's
Oh wow, so
literally
it's even.
equal,
Mm,
which is crazy. But like you said, like men don't have that conditioning where it's even less acceptable to be
yeah,
sensitive for guys, which sucks and like makes me so sad.
I
And I
know.
have a few really good HSP guy friends that I've just like met through this work. And so,
Mm,
yeah, it's different for each of them. Like I would say a couple of my guy friends they present as like being that really nice friend that like almost sometimes feels more comfortable, not always, but often feels more comfortable with like having friends that are female because it's like guys just like have their like
mm,
harsh locker room talk and like
yeah.
say all this stuff. And for some of them, it's like, oh, that's like too much. Like, that doesn't feel good
Yes.
to me. Like, I don't believe those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I have, some others where they actually went into more of like a hyper masculine vibe where it's like almost proving like, I'm not sensitive. Like, I don't care, where it's
Right.
like that tough exterior, like, I don't care about anything vibe. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
dude. And so underneath that is like so much shame where it's like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
they're just like feeling so bad. So it can go in different directions for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, there's this really good documentary called, I think it's called The Mask We Wear, and it's for men, and it's basically just about how guys are conditioned to suppress their emotions and like how it just starts at such a young age. So
Is it on
um
Netflix?
I don't remember if it's on Netflix, but I think if you like Google it, you can watch it for
Okay.
free on the internet.
Okay.
But one
The
of my
Mask
guy
We
friends
Wear.
told me, yeah, I believe that's what it's called. And I'm like, oh, it just like if I ever have a son in the future, like I
Mm-hmm.
think that just knowing that is so important for the way
Yeah.
we raise our own children.
Yeah, which perfect segue. Speaking of motherhood, I can imagine, I mean, I'm not there yet, but I would imagine that being a mom is definitely overstimulating at times. Obviously, especially as they get older with like toys being out or always something to have to do, the mental load, like constant noise from them, like just like all that stimulation. Have you noticed that it was like your like coping mechanisms or anything needed to be heightened or changed during the time? Did you notice a shift when you became a mother for people who are listening, who are moms, who are hoping to be one day or are currently pregnant, like, and they know that they are this sensitive person? What are some tips around that? Because I mean, I'm sure it's just like a completely different ball game once that happens.
Yeah, it's very intense becoming a mom when you're sensitive. It's like, oh my gosh, like for me, the biggest thing was like just having my time stripped from me where I could
Yeah.
usually like go and like meditate and do whatever. Like if I'm just like home with my daughter, like I have to be on with her. So
Right.
that was very jarring for me. So there's a few things that I've really kind of learned over time. Like understanding my sensitivity has been huge because I'm able to notice when I'm getting overstimulated and overwhelmed, and I can feel that. And so then I can
Mm,
be more proactive about it. So if I can't go meditate because I'm with her, then I'll go out for a walk if it's nice outside,
mm.
like moving my body, or that's huge, honestly. Or even like going in the car, taking her for a drive, like going to Target. Like
Yeah.
honestly, everyone's different, but for me, I'm like it's helped me so much to just like leave my environment and go new places and just like be
Yeah.
be with her and have experiences with her. I found that super
Mm,
nourishing, and just like being around other people. That's the other thing I would say is finding community of other moms has changed the game for me because I've just learned that I really need to connect with people. I really need to know that I'm not the only person experiencing something. And so
Yes.
that's like been huge. I think sensitive or not, we need that type of community and connection. Um,
100%.
but that just helped me a lot because when you're in it, it can feel very isolating and, oh my gosh, this is so hard. This is so intense. And then you connect with another mom who's like, I was up all night too. And,
Yeah.
I feel lonely at home, and it's like, oh, I'm not alone. And so that just like has soothed my soul, like super, super
Mm.
helpful. And then just like having ways that you can make the present moment more mindful. So like when you're washing the dishes or playing with your kid or whatever, or breastfeeding, like how can you make
Mhm.
that more of a meditation? Because again, you're not always going to be able to go clock out. So like, how can you like
Right.
do that? And then of course, like making sure you ask for help and
I was
like,
just gonna ask about that.
yeah,
Yes.
assert yourself. So now it's like with my husband, it's like he's working in a normal job and he comes home. And so it's like I have to assert what I need. And he's really good about like he's hands-on and he picks up on things. But like there are times where I'm just like, I'm at the end of my rope and I'm like, I need you to take her for 10 minutes and I need to just like go sit in silence and just like being able
Yeah.
to express and not feel guilty for needing help. Like there's way too much guilt because we
Yeah.
deserve it. Like we need that for our well-being and to show up,
Mhm.
powerfully.
I was just gonna say, like, does the guilt come up of, okay, needing like your partner when they get home from work to like support you, even though you're like, I know you were also at work, but this is just like a different type of work, but now I need you to still stay on, but in this way, but like I need to turn off. Like, does that come up?
Yeah, for me it comes up as like, oh, I have this more spacious schedule and you were just like
Hmm.
on all day sitting at a desk and doing all of this
Right.
like think logical stuff. And so yeah, that comes up. But he will even remind me too at the end of a long day. He's like, oh, I'm just so tired from working. He's like, I know you were working all day too, which is just like very validating to feel
Yes.
seen because motherhood, parenthood, it is work. It is such a
Yeah.
work. It's a
Yeah.
different kind of work, but it's a lot of emotions and it's a lot
Oh my
of being
God.
on.
Yeah.
So,
It's 100% a full-time job. Like,
uh-huh.
let's just
One,
normalize that.
yeah, yeah.
So and you're like, running your own business as well. So it's like you're doing both, which obviously I'll be in that same camp.
Mhm.
So I'm so glad we're in the mastermind together because I'm gonna be like
Me too.
crying in Voxer to you guys, I'm sure.
Oh, you'll be
Can't
so
wait.
good. Yeah, we're here for you.
You're the best. Um, okay, so we touched on like all the things I really wanted to talk about. One post specifically that I just want to touch on that you put up on that is like a good way to like kind of round this all out is like you were talking about how highly sensitive people will like take on the responsibility of like making sure that everyone around them is comfortable,
Mhm,
managing someone else's healing journey, responding immediately to everyone who contacts you, which I
mhm.
could definitely resonate with, like always having to be the one to support other people, upholding every single plan on your schedule, no matter how busy or exhausted you are, allowing people to treat you poorly just because they're struggling. I was like, oh my God, this post is so good.
Thank
So I literally just screenshotted it and read it straight from your post because I wanted to talk about it. So first of all, like you said in there, it's not your responsibility. And I know so many people listening will resonate with that of responding immediately, feeling like you have to take on the pain of other people, like all that stuff. Um, what can you suggest for them to like start shifting that mindset around it and start thinking about how being an HSP is like something that is a strength and
Mhm.
not a weakness, and something that you don't have to like burden yourself with all these things. Like instead of channeling that energy into making sure everyone's comfortable around you or whatever, how can you like channel it into like strengths within your life?
Yeah, such a good question. So I think that a lot of times we mistake being like caretaking and helping, being helpful and being responsible as like just this like glorified thing. It's like people are like, oh, she'd give the shirt off her back. Like, oh my
Mm,
gosh, what a selfless person. Like
like it's a good
that is
thing.
like, yeah, like it's a good thing. But like there's a difference between giving from a place of overflow because you have space, because
Yes.
you genuinely want to, and giving from a place of, I have to, I need to do this to be liked, to be accepted, to be validated,
Mm,
and you will feel that difference inside. So that's like one thing I would
totally.
actually suggest to people is like, when someone asks you to do something, like what's your gut reaction? Are you feeling resentful? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling like, why does everyone always ask me to do everything? Why can't anyone else do
Mm,
it? If you feel that way, that's a sign that you are giving from a place of like need and of like
and
kind of
lack.
wanting that and lack. Yes. And I found that
And the
in
other
my,
person will feel that too, by the
they'll
way.
feel
Like
that.
they will
Yes.
feel that it's coming from a place of like, oh, you don't even want to be doing this. Like you could tell.
You can always feel that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so to me, it's kind of like, why do you think you have to be that person? A lot of times there's like an identity wrapped up in it where we were always the caretaker. We were always the responsible one. Who am I if I don't do that? So it's like kind of
Mm,
like an identity thing. And sometimes feeling like, oh, well, people not like me or accept me or want to be my friend if I don't say yes. And honestly, if you start setting boundaries and not saying yes so easily and people don't want to be in your life, then thank goodness, because
yeah.
those aren't the people. Like it's one-sided.
Yeah, you're
So I
weeding
would
them out.
you're weeding them out. And so, and then the people who are on your team are the one like want to see you make time to care for yourself. So yeah, I
Yes.
would just say like, why do you think that you have to? Like, are you making it part of your identity and just like gut checking yourself? Like, how do I feel when I'm asked to do this?
Love
And then I'm
that.
a huge fan of like small steps, like small action
Hmm.
steps and doing little things to show yourself that you can rely on yourself, that you have your own back. So
Ooh.
that can look like changing, like I'm working on this, changing your relationship with your phone, like
Yes.
creating, not responding immediately. Like
Hmm.
that's so
It's
empowering
so
because
hard.
it's so hard because you're like, oh my God, I want to respond. I want to help. But
Yeah.
it's like
Yes.
when you create that space and when you're like, no, I don't need to do this, you start to like build that confidence, like, okay, I
Hmm.
have my own back. So it's hard, but it's so
Yeah.
important.
Like literally like putting my phone like in the drawer. Like I have to have it like out of sight, out of mind sometimes, because especially like you understand with having your business like at your fingertips on your phone, there's like so it's addicting in and of itself, just the
Mhm.
phone. And then you tie your business to it and it's like I have to have that. It's so hard to separate it. And, going into motherhood, I'm like, I know I have to like really be strict about this starting now because it's going to be totally different once that happens. But
Yeah.
I'm like, if it's in a different room, if it's in a drawer, like if I don't see it, then I won't like reach for it or it literally takes the pressure off of like me seeing a text and wanting to respond right away. It's like I don't see it, right? So it's like
So
having it
true.
out of the way has been so helpful for me. Or like intentionally leaving it behind. If like Chris and I are gonna go for a walk, I'm like, can you just bring your phone, like just in case something happens? Like I'm leaving mine because like I don't want to be on it, and I know that I will if I have it with me. Like I need to just literally leave it. So yeah, that's so helpful. And then the last thing that I want you to just end on before we talk about like ways people can connect with you are, what are the strengths of being an HSP? Like I just want you to like list a couple of things that like how it is a strength. Whether again the person listening does identify as a high sensitive person or their partner does, how they could start seeing the strength within themselves or in the people around them.
So there's a few, well, there's a lot, but I'll name a few. So like one of my favorites is I feel like being highly sensitive allows you to connect more deeply with other people because we are just so able to tune in with other people. We're tend to be pretty emotionally intelligent. So you can like notice the shifts in somebody's like facial
Mm,
expression. You can kind of sense their energy and their emotions.
yeah.
And that allows you to then connect in a real way. And because people always will tell me, oh my gosh, you make me feel so seen. And this is something that a ton of HSPs hear. Oh, I can tell you everything, So it's like
Mhm.
we have that knack where we're often that person who a stranger will come up to at the grocery store and like share their life story. So like
Yes.
have boundaries, but like also that's a strength and that can help you in friendships, relationships, and business.
Yes.
Like you are
Motherhood.
motherhood. Yes, being like in tune with your child,
Mm-hmm.
huge. And another
Yeah.
piece like related to that would be intuition. Highly sensitive people are definitely very intuitive because we're just so open and like noticing things and just really connected deeply to the world around us.
Mm,
So really like owning that and learning to like tap into your intuition, have little practices, whether it's like pulling cards or
yeah.
noticing angel numbers, start like writing down all the little like synchronicities in your day. Like that
Mm-hmm.
can help you strengthen it. And it can feel like you kind of have this like magical little like experience of life. Like that is
Yeah.
something that we have. So those
And
are a
to
couple of
trust it.
to trust it. That's
Yeah.
huge. And that's where I think when you just like play around with it, like, oh, noticing the little synchronicities can be kind of fun. And you're like, oh, wait, like all these cool things have happened for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah. And even
Yeah.
noticing like when your intuition is telling you something and you like know what it told you, whether you follow it or don't, you're going to see the result of that and just being like, oh, my intuition told me this and I followed it and like, look at how amazing it turned out. Or my intuition told me this, I didn't follow it and like, this is what happened. Like either way, it's like at least acknowledging like, oh, okay, I should trust myself because I see like the actual like evidence of it when I do and when I don't.
Yeah, that's so confidence boosting. It's like, okay, this is really
Yes.
cool. And the last thing I'll share, because that's like really top of mind for me lately, is like a lot of highly sensitive people are very creative and artistic.
Mm,
And I really think that it's because we are so emotional. We are just like feeling the high highs and the low lows. And so
yeah.
I just find that when that's how you experience life, like a lot of us have that or feel so compelled to write or to create in some way to like share, and that's
Mm,
really cool. Like
yeah.
a lot of artists are very sensitive, and it's like,
Yeah.
and also sensitive people have often a very rich imagination, which can be used, for anxiety, but it can be used for like creating brand new things. And so that's like one of
Right.
my favorite things. It's like you experience it on an intense level and you can do really cool things with that.
I love that. Oh, this was so good. I love it so much. Okay, so how can people find you on Instagram, your podcast? What offerings do you have? How do you work with people? Like, give us the rundown.
Yeah. So Instagram's a good place to find me at Life by Alissa, my website, sensitiveandsoulful.com, and definitely tune into the podcast if you
Yes.
suspect you're an HSP or you have HSPs in your life. And right now
And
my
what's it
I
called
have a
again? Just so you say
oh
it
yeah,
again.
the Sensitive and Soulful Show.
Okay. And obviously
So
all this will be in the show notes. So if you're driving, you're doing laundry, whatever you're doing for a walk, like just head to the show notes. All the links will be there.
yes. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is I have a course on self-worth for highly sensitive people because I've just found that like healing my self-worth has been a complete game changer in my life.
Oof.
So that can be found on my website as well.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, so many people need that. That's amazing that you have that. I'm so excited about it. So thank you so much, Alissa, for being here, for sharing your time, and for like just being such an open book about everything. I know it's gonna be so helpful for everybody. If you can, if you're listening to this, if this impacted you in any way, the best thing we could do for our listeners is to share this on social media, tag Alissa at Life by Alissa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And at obviously Corinne Angelica, let us know like what was your biggest takeaway? Like when someone comes on and shares their time, it's like they want to know what you got out of it. So it's always so nice. Or even if you don't want to share it on your Instagram, like just like message her, let her know what she got at it, what you got out of it, share this with a friend. It's the best thing we could do to thank our not listener, our interviewee, our person, our guest. There's the word. I'm
Yeah.
like, what the hell is the name? Our guest for being here. So thank you again, Alissa. And I will talk to you soon.
Yay. Thank you.